Good afternoon and good morning and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler and I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today as we kick off the Spring 2023 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. Before we get started, we'd like to take a poll to find out more about you. A quick reminder that if you're using Zoom from a desktop browser, you may not be able to access this poll, so you want to make sure that you're viewing this presentation and all the presentations this week from the Zoom application. For the sixth time now, the Grants Conference is taking place online with 1 week's worth of webinars for the research community. They are running this week through Thursday, June 8th. And for information about all of the sessions and our speakers, please visit the conference website. The content for this series is similar to what it would be for an in-person conference. So by the end of this conference, we want you to understand NSF. We want you to know what we fund. We want you to know how to prepare a proposal. We also want you to understand the merit review process at NSF, as well as your responsibilities for managing NSF awards. Sessions will range in scope from the broad overview of policies and processes to specific information about the funding opportunities in each of the NSF directorates. We are very excited that you can join us today. We've been doing these conferences since back in the early 90s. They started as small single-day events with a handful of program staff, and they've now become a multi-day virtual event with many NSF staff members. We truly hope you enjoy this conference. I'm now pleased to present this session, which is going to cover proposal preparation, and this session will be presented by Jean Feldman, Bogdan Mihaila, and Eleanor Sayre.
Well, welcome everyone to the Spring 2023 NSF Virtual Grants Conference session on proposal preparation. This is our first formal presentation of the conference, and we look forward to the many questions that you may have regarding this topic. Next slide, please. I am joined today by Bogdan and Eleanor as part of this session. My name is Jean Feldman. I'm head of the policy office in the Division of Institution and Award Support in the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management. And Bogdan and Eleanor will be introducing themselves as part of each of their first session. Next slide. We've got a lot to cover as part of this session that we hope will be very valuable to you. We're going to talk about how you might find those funding opportunities that you're interested in and finding programs for which you may want to submit a proposal to. We're going to talk a lot about the contents of the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, and that is truly a document that you want to become familiar with before you start your first proposal submission to NSF. We're going to cover the various types of proposal submissions that may be submitted to NSF and which are covered in what we call the PAP Guide, or the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. We're also going to dive into the sections of an NSF proposal, not simply the coverage on here's what this one is, but more in detail about what are the contents of it. What are reviewers and NSF program staff looking for when they're looking at that section of an NSF proposal? And then we're going to dive into two documents which are required supplementary documents, the Postdoctoral Mentoring Plan and the Data Management Plan. And our mantra throughout this entire conference is ask early and ask often. And we certainly hope you take the opportunity during this conference to do so. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bogdan to go into finding funding opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Welcome, everyone. I'm Bogdan Mihaila. I'm a program director in the Division of Physics in MPS. And it is my pleasure to talk to you about funding opportunities, a few details about policy documents that you might find useful. So I expect that given the fact that you are here, you are very familiar with the nsf.gov website. This is really the one place where all the information that you need to find a funding opportunity for an NSF proposal and how to submit the proposal and how to write the proposal, all that information is present here. So let's start with finding the funding opportunities. If the NSF portals provides a keyword search and a way of actually down selecting the types of proposals that suit your needs. So once you actually have a topic in mind, and if you want to find out if NSF supports research in that area, and which particular funding opportunities are best suitable for the type of research that you're interested in, this is your place to start. We also want to draw your attention to another feature of the NSF website, which concerns access to an extensive database of award information, existing and past award NSF awards that you can search, that you can do a keyword search with the topics that you actually have in mind and find out about which programs at NSF are generally supporting this type of research, who are the cognizant program directors for the specific proposals that were funded in the past, and also information about the length of the awards and the funding levels, so on and so forth. So if you are in doubt about which particular section of NSF supports that type of research you are interested in, this is another very good place to consider. If the NSF.gov did not provide all the information that you were looking for, another place that you may want to consider is grants.gov. And you can do similar searches there and hopefully find the information that you want. A few words about the proposal and award policies and procedures guide. This document is extremely important. It contains the documents relating to NSF proposal and award process, proposal review and award process. It's important to keep in mind, just to assure you that this is really important to you. This document was designed to serve the needs of both our PIs, our communities, and NSF staff. There are two sections to this document. The part one concerns the proposal preparation and submission guidelines. The second part concerns the award administration guidelines. You do not really have to worry about necessarily about the part two. I mean, if it's a good idea to actually familiarize yourself with that, but at the end of the day, when you submit a proposal, you really have to focus on part one. Once you have been awarded, your proposal has been accepted and recommended for an award, and the award has been made by NSF, then it's time to actually really go and take another look to the award and administration guidelines. The PAPG provides guidance for the preparation and submission of proposals to NSF, describes the processes and criteria by which proposals are being reviewed, outlines reasons for which your proposal may not be accepted or returned without review. That's important to keep in mind, to guard against those. Describes the process for withdrawals, returns, and declinations, and it includes policies to guide, manage, and monitor the award and administration of grants and cooperative agreements. A few more words about the funding opportunities, the types of funding opportunities you may encounter. We have program descriptions, program announcements, program solicitations, broad agency announcements, and dear colleague letters. The PABG plays a central role in all these type of funding opportunities. But it's important to keep in mind that the program solicitations, proposals that are submitted to the program solicitations, the proposal must follow the instructions in the program solicitation. The PABG cannot really cover all possible instances, all possible needs that we may have. And therefore, the program solicitation provides additional information that PIs should keep in mind in preparing their proposal to NSF. Similarly, in the case of broad agency announcements, the proposals must follow the instructions in the BAA. And as far as the dear colleague letters are concerned, these are mostly ways of communicating by NSF with the NSF communities. So there are notifications of opportunities or special competitions that you may want to participate in. So what to look in a program announcement or solicitation? There are three aspects that you have to keep in mind. First of all, understand what the goal of the program is. Make sure that you are eligible to submit to that particular program or solicitation, and then acquaint yourself with the special proposal preparation and or award requirements. When you open a solicitation document, there is a cover page, and that provides information regarding the program solicitation number. You will be required to enter this when you actually submit your proposal, so you better know what it is. It's important for you to actually make sure that the directorate or the office that you would like to engage with really supports that particular funding opportunity. Do not just assume that every funding opportunity at NSF essentially addresses the needs of all the communities that may consider submitting proposals to NSF. There is information about the award. It's important to keep in mind that these are estimates, and the actual numbers and sizes of the awards will depend on the quality of the proposals that we receive and the availability of funds. That said, going in, you should know which type of award we are looking at. What is the estimated number of awards? What is the anticipated funding amount that's made available to that particular funding opportunity in one given year? Eligibility information. Who may submit proposals? Who may serve as PI? Are there any limits on the number of proposals per organization? And are there any limits on the number of proposals that a PI, that a specific researcher can submit as a PI or as a co-PI? So all this information is really important to you in preparing for your submission, and you should keep those in mind. Concept outlines are sometimes required for some categories of funding opportunities. Letters of intent may be required and serve the program office, aid the program office in their management of the reviewer selection process and panelist member selection process. We have pretty stringent COI conflict of interest considerations that we have to apply in the selection of reviewers and panelists. And sometimes the program requires some advance notice about which PIs may submit a proposal or which institution may submit that particular proposal. Similarly, there are funding opportunities that require preliminary proposals. Be aware of those things. Some preliminary proposals are required. Sometimes they're optional, sometimes are not required. When can you submit a proposal? It's also important to know. Some programs have no deadlines and proposals may be submitted at any time. Other programs have target dates, in which case you are really, strongly encouraged to contact the program office if you think you might miss that particular date. For clarity, the target dates are dates after which the proposals are still being accepted. That's important. However, they may miss a particular panel or committee meeting, which means that essentially funding, if funding may be delayed if the proposal is found to be meritorious. We also have deadline dates, in which case these are dates after which the proposals will not be accepted or will be returned without review. The deadlines will be waived only under extenuating circumstances, and such deviations can only be authorized in accordance with Chapter 2A of the PABG. So when a solicitation requires submissions by a certain date, governed by a deadline, please be aware that you should make sure that you meet those requirements, date and time, 5 p.m. submitter's local time, which means that we are strongly encouraging you to actually submit early to make sure that you do not miss the deadline. We also use submission windows, which are designated period of times during which the proposal will be accepted for review by NSF. It's important to note that it is NSF's policy that the end date of a submission window converts to and is subject to the same policies as the deadline date. So once again, if there is a submission window for you to submit your proposal to, then try to submit earlier in the submission window to make sure that your proposal is being considered by NSF. So it is time for me to actually hand it over to Eleanor, who's going to continue this presentation. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Thanks, Bogdan. I'm Eleanor Sayre. I'm a program director in the Directorate for STEM Education in the Division of Undergraduate Education. And I'm going to talk to you about what are the pieces of a proposal. And the first set of pieces I'm going to talk to you about are these single copy documents. These are for NSF use only and are not provided to reviewers. This includes authorizations to deviate from proposal preparation requirements, suggested reviewers to include or not include, proprietary or privileged information, and proposal certifications provided by the organization or by senior personnel. The rest of your research proposal does go out to our reviewers, and there are a lot of pieces here. I'm going to talk about some of them, and then my colleague Jean is going to come back again and talk about more of them. The thing I want to highlight right now is if you don't keep these required sections in your proposal may not be accepted and it may be returned without review. The first section I'm going to talk about, this is the thing that happens right on the front, is the cover sheet. Many of the boxes on the cover sheet are going to be electronically pre-filled in as part of your login process. And there are some checkboxes for you to click on. For each of these, the details of what you're going to select depend on the proposal that you are writing, the directorate you are submitting to, and the program that you're applying to. There's more details about what to do about each of these in the PAPPG. The project summary is your first opportunity to tell us what your project is about. It's short. There are 3 text boxes here. They must contain an overview of your project and a statement on the intellectual merit of your project and a statement on the broader impacts of your project. You must do all of them. You must talk about all of these things. If you don't, your proposal will not be accepted. After your project summary comes your project description. And in your project description, this is your opportunity to tell us about all of the fabulous things you want to do in this proposal. You need to address, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How are you going to do it? How will you know if you succeed and how you will measure success? And what benefits could accrue to society if the project is successful? A separate section within your narrative, within your project description, must include a description and a discussion of the broader impacts of your proposed activities. You must also include a section on the results of prior NSF support. At the end, after your project description, the next document that you will include is your references cited. You have to cite people. Your references document does not need to follow any particular format, but it must use accepted scholarly practices to provide citations. There's no limit to how many citations you are allowed to include, but this is just references cited, not additional footnote information. Next, my colleague Jean is going to talk to you about the budget and other pieces of your proposal.
So now we come to the budget and the budget justification. In terms of how we view this section of the proposal, and when I say we, I'm referring to NSF program staff as well as the reviewers of your proposal, what question they're trying to answer with both this section and the section that follows, facilities, equipment, and other resources, is the question of, are there adequate resources available to the PI, either at the home organization or through collaborations to carry out the proposed activity? And of course, each proposal submitted to NSF must have a budget. And the budget is accompanied by a budget justification that should be and really must be no longer than 5 pages for all of the years of the project combined. If a proposal includes a subaward, it also has to have a separate budget justification of no more than 5 pages for each subaward. Now you see a screenshot on this slide of how the budget will actually appear to the program staff at NSF and the reviewers. And on this particular slide, if you see a category that has information populated in it, a very, very strong recommendation is that there be an associated entry for that particular budget category in the budget justification document. This is an important opportunity for you to truly justify what it is you're asking for, what it's going to be used for, so that NSF program staff and reviewers have a better understanding of where you're heading with what you're proposing to do. The budget and budget justification are also very, very essential in helping the NSF program staff and reviewers understand whether you understand what it is you're proposing to do. For example, you may be proposing to do something and you recommend or you indicate that you would like to have 2 graduate students and 2 postdocs. What reviewers and program staff are looking for is, look, based on what they're proposing to do, not how much it costs, but what are they proposing? Is it reasonable for that kind of research activity? And so the budget really is an essential document in helping us understand whether you have what you need to accomplish in the proposed scope of work. Next slide, please. In terms of budgetary guidelines, let's let's hit down to basics. When you are thinking about a budget, and this is really one of the most frequently asked questions that we receive, is how much should I ask for? And we get in budgets that are definitely, folks are asking for perhaps too much, and similarly, too little. What you should be thinking about is ask for what you need to carry out that scope of work. Again, that gets to explaining to NSF program staff and reviewers that you understand what you're proposing and how it is you plan to get there with the associated budget. So when you think about it, obviously, the amounts should be realistic and reasonable. And as I've already mentioned, it is essential that they be well justified and you explain what it is you need that funding and how you intend to achieve that, as well as consistent with any guidelines that may be specified, for example, in a program solicitation. One other point that I'd like to make that's not really on this slide is that you should also be communicating with your sponsored projects office or equivalent, because they may have policies and procedures on how various budget categories are calculated that can be very, very helpful for you as you put this proposal together. And in fact, at some institutions, there is help provided by them in actually putting this budget together. So I would strongly encourage you to reach out to your sponsored project staff or program staff in assisting you in completion with the budget to ensure it's consistent with your institution's policies and procedures. Now, on the budget or the screenshot of the budget that was just shown to you, eligible costs consists of a number of categories here. Well, let's go into some helpful hints on some of these. Personnel. NSF has, as a general policy, a requirement that salary compensation requested in the proposal budget for senior personnel is limited to no more than 2 months of the individual's regular salary in any 1 year. So that's all of the proposals you have joined together cannot be more than 2 months. The PAP guide goes on to say that you can ask for more than 2 months, but you must justify why you need that. And it's best to tie that to the scope of work and why that extra time is truly needed. Now, if it's approved in the award budget, that will serve as your approval that NSF program staff have approved that excess amount of time over 2 months. Other categories include equipment and travel, and that includes both travel in the US as well as any international travel that you plan to participate in and are asking for funding for. We also have a category called participant support costs, and this may be truly one of the most misunderstood budget categories on the NSF budget. And participant support costs is really intended to call out costs for items such as stipends or subsistence allowances, travel, registration fees, etc., that are paid to or on behalf of participants or trainees, not employees, in connection with NSF-sponsored conferences or training projects. So that is when we expect for you to use participant support costs. Now, your institution also may provide you assistance in identifying whether or not a particular undergraduate student, for example, falls under Part B of the budget or would be most appropriate to include under participant support. We also have other direct cost categories where you could put subawards, and subawards are other entities which are carrying out a part of the scope of work if they are known at the time of proposal submission. Any consultants that you may want to involve in the project, computer services and publication costs. So again, the bottom line is to be thinking about what it costs or what it may cost to achieve that in terms of budget categories, your scope of work, and that you are working with your sponsored projects offices in making sure that those are consistent with institutional policies and procedures. Next slide, please. The second part of the proposal that I'd like to talk about is facilities, equipment, and other resources. And this particular section of the proposal is used to assess the adequacy of the organizational resources available to perform the effort proposed. And as I've mentioned, this, in addition to the budget, is basically what shows reviewers and NSF program staff what it is that is available to carry out the work proposed, either funding that you're requesting directly from NSF, or that either is provided by you or one of your collaborating organizations. And this section is an aggregated description of the internal and external resources. This is both physical and personnel that the organization, collaborators, and subawardees will provide to the project should it be funded. Such information is really supposed to be provided in this section if it's going to be provided by you or one of your collaborators or subawardees, rather than in other parts of the proposal. I would also say we get lots of questions about this particular section and how you document this. Many times you will, for example, get a letter of collaboration that lets folks know what it is you're doing, and that organization plans on contributing those particular resources. We have draft language in the PAP guide on how that information or how that collaboration can be documented, but it is recommended and not required. So again, another important part of the proposal that helps reviewers assess whether there are adequate resources available. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Eleanor for the next set of slides.
Thanks, Jean. Let me talk about some other sections in your proposal. You need to include biographical sketches for all senior project personnel. Each of these may not be more than 3 pages in length per each individual. Your bio sketch is used to assess how well qualified you and your team and your organization are to conduct these proposed activities. You must use the format we specify. And starting October 23rd, you must use Science CV. You're allowed to use it now, so get started early. Additionally, you will need to provide a section on your current and pending other support. This, again, uses a very specified format. Science CV will be mandatory soon. We're going to use this information to assess how much capacity you have to do this research as you've proposed it, as well as to help us assess any potential overlap or duplication between this project and some of your other projects, or some of the other projects that your team may be engaged in. Additionally, you are going to produce for us some more documents around your data management plan, how you will manage the data generated and products generated by this project. If there are postdocs involved in your project, either at your institution or your collaborating institutions, you must include a 1-page postdoctoral mentoring plan, as well as other pertinent supplementary information like letters of collaboration. There's more information in the PAPG about what these look like in general, and your solicitation may ask you to include additional documents in this section. So read your solicitation carefully as well. Let's talk a little bit about these letters of collaboration. There is a very prescribed format for this, and it goes like this. If the proposal submitted by Dr. PI entitled title is selected for funding by the NSF, it is my intent to collaborate and/or commit resources as detailed in the project description for the facilities, equipment, and other resources section of the proposal. You will put this on letter. The people writing these letters for you will put them on letterhead and they'll sign them. They may not recommend the project or endorse the PI or endorse the project. Don't add extra stuff. If you add extra stuff, you risk having your proposal returned without review. You must describe these activities that your collaborators are doing in the project description or in the facilities, equipment, and other resources page. This includes stuff like, what are their intellectual contributions? Are they going to have permission to access a site or use an instrumentation or a facility? Are they bringing in samples or materials? Are they giving logistical support or evaluation? If they're mentoring US students at a foreign site, that's what you include that as well. That information does not go in their letter. It goes in the project description or in the facilities, equipment, and other resources page as appropriate. Let's talk about this postdoc plan. If your proposal includes funding to support postdoctoral researchers, then you must include a description of how you will mentor those individuals. What are the mentoring activities that will be provided for them? These mentoring activities are evaluated as part of the merit review process under the broader impacts merit review criterion. If you have a postdoc in the budget, but do not include this postdoc mentoring plan, you will not be able to submit. If you have a collaborative proposal, the lead organization will submit a mentoring plan for all of the postdocs under the entire collaborative project. That's one plan for all postdocs at all sites. What counts as mentoring? Look, postdocs are trainees. So you want to train them in whatever they're going to do next. This could look like career counseling, training on how to prepare grant proposals, training in responsible research practices. This could look like help in developing publications and presentations. This could look like guidance on techniques to improve their teaching and mentoring skills. This could look like counseling on effective collaboration with researchers from diverse backgrounds and in disciplinary areas. It's up to you to make a good case that you are supporting these trainees as they prepare for the next stage of their professional journey. Let's talk about the data management plan. All proposals are required to include, in the supplementary documents, a data management plan of up to 2 pages. In your plan, you need to describe how this proposal will conform to the NSF policy on dissemination and sharing of research results. Your valid data management plan might only include the statement that no detailed plan is needed, as long as there's a clear justification why it is in fact not needed. Your data management plan will be reviewed as part of the intellectual merit and/or the broader impacts of your proposal. There's a lot more detail of this in the PAPPG, and I encourage you to carefully read what the requirements are and make sure you're hitting all the points. As you are preparing this data management plan, here's some additional documentation on our website. This concludes our discussion of the pieces of your proposal and how to find a solicitation or an opportunity to apply to. I want to reiterate again, hey, you got questions? Ask them early, ask them often. Here are some links for you to find people that you can ask. Thank you so much for participating. Now we're going to take some more live questions from the audience.
Okay, let me welcome back my colleagues here for this session. We received a lot of questions and we have quite a good amount of time here to be able to get to as many of them as we can. What I've attempted to do is, as they've been coming in, I've been kind of putting them in different buckets so that we can kind of cover all topical areas at once together instead of going back and forth through the questions as they came in. So we do have a lot, and so I would ask our panelists to jump in and have a discussion with some of these and different perspectives. So why don't we start off by asking some general questions just about communication. So when you're preparing to submit a proposal to NSF, should that person be contacting the program officer? How would you like to be contacted? Do you want to do you want to talk to somebody on the phone? Do you want to get an email? What's the best way to get information about the program you want to submit to, and also get feedback on potentially a program or a proposal that you have?
I love this question.
I think our program officers can feel that one.
So there are kind of two pieces of this. The first is, who should you be contacting early when you're still thinking about ideas and you want to see if your ideas fit in a particular program, or if or you're trying to decide between programs and you want to know how your ideas fit. Yes, you should definitely contact a program officer, or depending on what program you're thinking about, there could be a generalist email address that will go out to all of the program officers, and then we'll coordinate amongst ourselves to make sure it gets to the right person. A different question that you could be asking is, should I send a notification to program officers that, hey, I have submitted a proposal, I have clicked a button? No, we don't need that. The system will tell us. How should you do this? Everybody's different, but generally email is the safest choice. Phone calls, don't call people unless they tell you to call them first.
Bogdan, do you have any other?
Yeah, maybe I should add
on that.
We are here to actually serve the community, and part of that is interacting and advising the community regarding the process and not the contents of your proposal. So it is safe to say that you do not have to call us at all, but definitely we encourage essentially, an interaction with our PIs. But do keep in mind the fact that we do not need to know in detail what you will be writing about. We will definitely not advise you about the suitability of, methods, scientific methods that you are doing, how to make up your teams or whatever. We will, however, be available to answer questions regarding the type of proposals we are supporting in a specific program. And the process that you should actually follow in submitting your proposal and putting together your proposal. Thank you.
And hey, I want to do a special shout out to new PIs. If you're new, I really want to hear from you. And if you're the kind of institution that is teaching centered, or it's a minority serving institution, or it's a small school, or it's a 2-year college, and you're feeling kind of nervous, oh yeah, I really want to hear from you. Don't be scared. We're really friendly.
Great. Okay, just some other kind of general things here before we go into the specific sections of the proposal that you discussed. Is there a way for a proposer to see a successful funded proposal package? I think we get this question a lot. Does NSF provide that information?
No.
And I guess,
hold on. We don't. And there's a reason we don't. And we got a lot of questions in this space. And we have talked about this, and we're in one of the questions compared with NIH. Okay, NIH funds biomedical research. We're the broadest funder of basic fundamental research in the US government. And actually, that means there are nuances that do, I mean, obviously the content and the sections of the proposal, but how you would formulate that section and the kinds of information might really differ from one to another. But what we do provide and what is available are proposals that have been funded. We mentioned that in the very beginning. And so if you have a sense that you'd like to know what NSF is funded in a given area, that you can find readily on the NSF website. It's just not examples of, and what we also find is that if we would do that, and it was the same way when we actually give you examples of things, what happens is we get that included in what is submitted by you. So we really want you to be thinking and creative and thinking out of the box rather than, giving you something that you could just copy from because you know it's been funded. Think out of the box, folks. That's what we're really excited about.
Okay. I have a question asking about letters of support. I saw a number of questions about letters of support. So perhaps we can talk a little bit about the difference between a letter of support versus a letter of collaboration, because they're different.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eleanor.
We want you to have collaborators, and we want you to work across with different people and have the project team that does the science well. But we don't want you to get around the 15-page limit for the project description. So the stuff you put in the letter, the stuff your collaborators put in the letter, should not be extra info that's getting around the page limit for the project description. So use the template. It's safe.
Also, let's remember that there's a letter of collaboration, which is what she was talking about. Letters of support, frankly, over the years have been interpreted to read, I love this person is amazing, and I think they should be funded. That is not what we're interested in. Some of our EDU program solicitations do allow for those, but that's unusual. What we're interested in is exactly what Eleanor was talking about. Many of our most successful are great collaborations between a number of investigators. And so if someone is not from that institution, they're simply saying, yeah, I am going to engage in this. And we give you the format, as Eleanor has already mentioned, for you to do that.
One small caveat, because I'm in EDU, so we're the weirdos. Is that there are solicitations, some of them are in EDU, but some of them are elsewhere, like the mid-career advancement solicitation, which have in the solicitation a required document from a particular person or a particular office, which should cover particular topics.
Yes.
Because the solicitation says, cover these topics in a letter, we want you to, in fact, cover those topics in a letter.
But most of those aren't really letters of support. They're really something very different.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, we have a question about how can I submit my proposal to multiple programs with the same proposal?
Please do not.
No.
You do not.
Yeah, the answer on that one is easy. You submit one at a time. And then once you've received the decision, you cannot send for simultaneous consideration by multiple NSF programs the same proposal. Now, if you've got a completely different idea, That's not the same, but if you're really talking about, I want to submit it. Now, what you can do is you could put on the cover sheet in the box for consideration by, you can put a number of different organizations at NSF, and then NSF will figure that out. But the bottom line is, we consider one proposal at a time, and then you could submit it once you've received that decision.
Right.
Okay. Next question is asking about the beginning investigator box on the cover sheet that is for the proposal submitted to the Biological Sciences Directorate. The question is, what does that checkbox actually do?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, I'm not
Please.
a bio person.
Yeah. Okay, so I can answer.
We don't have a bio person on the panel, but we could probably get an answer to that.
Yeah, no, we got that particular box. The Biological Sciences Directorate is the only directorate at NSF that places a limitation on simultaneous submission of a proposal to NSF and another funding agency at the same time. And there are instructions in the PAP guide that address this issue. And the exceptions for that is if you are, and they're available in the PAP guide in Chapter 2E. But the only exceptions are when the program officers at the relevant agencies have agreed to joint review and possible joint funding, or proposals from PIs who are truly beginning investigators. So checking that box means that you meet one of those conditions, and that allows it to go through. Otherwise, you cannot, and read NIH often, you can't submit the same proposal to NSF and NIH unless you meet one of those two conditions. And checking that box means that you do meet one of those two conditions.
Great. A few questions on eligibility. And the first question is, do the limits on organization and PIs refer to awards or proposals submitted? And then the follow-up question to that is, can you submit multiple times to a program if you are not awarded?
So the answer there is that the limits definitely apply to the proposals being submitted. First and foremost, because we do not know what will actually be funded, awarded later on. So essentially, that's what you really have to keep in mind, right? So we are only talking about what happens at the time of the submission of the proposal.
And once you've received that decision, then if there's another deadline date or target date out there, then you can resubmit after you've received that decision, but not until that time.
Also, some programs are a little bit different. So when in doubt, talk to a program officer that works on the program you're curious about.
Absolutely. Always a good idea.
Okay, sorry, I had sound like a dog fight going on outside here. Do PIs and co-PIs, are they required to have PhDs to submit proposals?
Generally, no.
No.
Generally. There are some particular solicitations where that might be true, but in general sense, no.
We clear them, and I don't remember seeing one, do you, Jeremy, for a very long time that says you have to have a PhD.
No, I don't. Of course, you always want to make sure you're reading the funding opportunity and the solicitation very carefully, because we do put those eligibility criteria that will differ from the PAP guide in a program solicitation.
Yep.
Who is normally considered senior personnel? The next question.
The answer to that is it is absolutely up to the institution or organization submitting the proposal. They are the ones that identify senior/key persons, and they're going to have to do that because research.gov will make you do that when you are putting that section, when you are putting the personnel, senior personnel section together. It will make you identify. Now, you can have as many non-PI or co-PI senior personnel as you want, unless the solicitation specifies, but we allow only one PI and up to 4 co-PIs. And so I thought I should point that out as well. Now, colleagues, do you have anything to add to that?
On a collaborative proposal, it's 1 PI and 4 co-PIs per collaborative institution.
Yes. For a separately submitted, yes.
Yep.
If it's a PI, if it's with subawards, it's still the 1 and 4.
Yes.
Correct. And the latter, the case of, for instance, institute proposal, the STCs, the Science and Technology Centers, or the Physics Frontier Centers, all the other center type proposals that, where we essentially support a team effort in order to address a particular question. In that particular case, the budget clearly will be supporting an effort that is larger than 5 people. In that particular case, essentially all senior personnel, people who actually will be conducting important research towards the goals of the proposals, and not students and postdocs or technicians or programmers or other types of personnel that have been identified. So those folks will definitely become senior personnel, and they will be required to submit biosketches and current and pending support and COA files and so on.
And we're going to get into a lot of questions in a little bit on current and pending support, because we did get quite a few, but we're going to get there. So don't worry, we're going to get there. So another question about a type of submission is asking if you can elaborate a little bit more on the differences between a concept outline and a letter of intent.
If you don't want to do it,
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
And I'll let them, Joe, because these are the folks, these 2 people, folks, are the ones that actually, when your proposal comes in, they're the ones handling that proposal. But these 2 documents, the concept outline is relatively new at NSF, and it is a document that is sometimes required. For concept outlines, you're planning, rapid, eager, raise, you must submit a concept outline. And it really is just that. What's the concept? And is that concept right for the fund? And a solicitation may require you to submit one. Is it right for the type of proposal or program that you're submitting to? Is that concept the right thing for that program? A letter of intent is different. When we ask for a letter of intent, it is often to gauge the number of proposals that are going to come in. We often use it when it's a very new type of program and we don't know what to expect. It also offers us the opportunity, because of the information that is included in it, which is often has your collaborators, et cetera. It helps us manage or get a jump start on managing the review process. And so that's very much again, it's size and range of the competition, helping to manage reviewers and panelists, as well as to help avoid potential conflicts of interest in the review process. The concept outline is about the idea, and is it right for either the program or the solicitation that you plan to submit to. And you will hear a response from the program officer that identifies, and that if they say yes, you will have to upload with that proposal to NSF. Eleanor, Bogdan, add more.
I'm an EDU, the Directorate for STEM Education. We don't handle these things very often in the programs that I support.
Yes, we definitely do. Definitely letters of intent. So right now I'm talking about directorates like, bio or engineering or MPS
Right.
or science. For the large collaborative efforts that we support, conflict of interest become very difficult to handle at some point. So if you can just imagine, if you're going to receive a lot of proposals and each proposal is for a lot of money, that means that there would be lots of names that would be attached to that particular proposal.
Right.
That essentially will exclude a number of institutions and definitely make it difficult for us to navigate, to balance the 2 points of tension. On one hand, you want to have all the expertise that you need on the panels and the reviewer pool, and on the other hand, you want to make sure that COIs are being observed and addressed. So we need a head start, and the letters of intent definitely serve that particular purpose. In some sense, the outlines are what you would be submitting anyway when you would contact a program director asking, is this idea suitable to the program that you manage or the solicitation that you are responsible for. But it's much more formalized than an informal inquiry.
Okay, let's move on into the project description. A couple questions about what is allowable and what is not allowable. A couple of questions here on, is it okay to use hyperlinks and colors for references and figures and equations in a proposal?
No hyperlinks in the project description, period. That's very clear in the PAC guide.
Okay, and then
graphics, tables, everything else, unless the solicitation gives a larger number, it's 15 pages for you to address both intellectual merit and broader impacts. And that includes any tables, graphics, whatever that you want to put in there, but no hyperlinks.
Including a hyperlink would imply that there is additional information outside of your project description, which is not okay.
Yeah.
It is allowable to use color, but we can't promise that other people are going to print in color if they're going to print at all. If intellectually the work of your project demands that you include websites, like as a result of prior support, we developed this website, you can give the name of the website and then and the citation in your references cited.
Right.
You can't actually hyperlink it in your project description.
Right.
okay. Next question in that general area is about results from prior NSF support. If there are no results from prior NSF support, should that section just be admitted or omitted, I should say, or should they state specifically that there are none or that it is not applicable?
There are 2 pieces here. If you've never gotten prior NSF support, then you should say the PI has never received prior NSF support or has not received prior NSF support in the last 5 years. If you have gotten support, but it's so recent that you don't have results yet, you still need to say, I've got this award number, here are all the pieces, and part of the pieces is the start date. And we're smart people. We can look at a start date and say like, oh yeah, this is super new. There's no results yet. But we want to see that award number in there and the other required pieces of that section.
Great. I have one question only on the biographical sketch. I'll scan, maybe there are more, but this is asking about the appointment section within the biographical sketch and whether you need to include all of your positions, such as an adjunct professor, if that's something that you want to see in that appointment section of the biographical sketch.
Definitely, because those particular affiliation will have an impact on what we consider to be conflict of interest or not. So you have to disclose those the institutions that you're affiliated with, whatever the capacity is.
All academic, institutional, and professional appointments, although there are some limitation on professional appointments. We even call out adjunct as being one of the ones that is required.
Great. So let's move into current and pending support. A number of questions. I've tried to pick out some of the ones that I think are most representative. First is this person writes that it's their understanding that person months should account for both salary from the award and the effort that is on the project. One, can you confirm that that's correct? And then two, how do you indicate in the current and pending support how many person months come from award salary and how many person months come from effort without award salary for that PI?
There is some confusion here. First of all, what are we using current and pending other support for? We are using it to assess capacity, conflict of commitment, and any overlap or duplication with the proposal being submitted. So what we want when we are asking for current and pending other support, and there are two projects and proposals in a separate section on in-kind contributions. We want, you have this particular pending or a proposal that's been awarded. We want to know how much time it will take you to complete your portion of that scope, and then a dollar value. The bottom line is, in reality, you don't even have to be getting any money per se if you are spending time. Now, if you're not spending any time, and there are some in-kind contributions, somebody gives you a data set, you're not spending any time on it. But we have a table out there that would be very useful. It's called, and I'll put it in the chat, it's called NSF Pre-Award and Post-Award Disclosures Relating to the Biographical Sketch and Current and Pending Other Support. And it's very, very helpful when I was going through the comments, questions, to identify what must be, and I just put it in there, what must be reported and what must not. But the bottom line is what we're trying to find out here is when you add all this together, does this individual have the capacity to carry out the research as proposed based on what their contribution is? And that table says some things have to be included, some things don't, based on all of the questions that we have received.
Okay, next question related to current and pending is if a project ends just prior to the start date of a proposal, do we leave it off the current and pending?
I think I think the answer to that question is a definite yes, we do. Yes. Right? Again, what you have to focus is when you submit the proposal. That's where that information is made available, disclosed to NSF, disclosed to the agency, right? So the fact that you have really zero control on when, if your proposal is being picked up for an award recommendation and it's recommended and processed and everything else, you do not know when that proposal will end. And even if it were to actually end before that, we still want to know exactly what you are working on, right? What kind of research you've been doing, who's been supporting it, so on and so forth. So definitely we want that information. Jean, please add.
Yeah, and in fact, we just instituted starting January 30, 2023. If someone is going to be, if a proposal is going to, the program officer believes that they may be recommending an award, we will go out, well, actually the program officer has work they have to do to make this happen, but they will request a new updated current and pending other support where you can update this information so it is the latest and greatest information available. And then they can use that to, again, as Bogdan said, we really need to know what you're doing. And this helps us make good decisions. And so you will actually be providing it a second time if you may be recommended for an award by a program officer.
I do want to say, though, if you've got stuff on your current and pending, and this is an award that has it's a project that has already expired, you're no longer doing it at time of submission, I don't need to see it in your current and pending.
Yeah, because it doesn't impact capacity. It's done.
Impact your capacity, right?
Yeah, it's over.
So if you've got stuff on there that ended in 2022, I don't want to see it in your 2023 submissions.
Great. Let's move on to the budget section of the proposal. First question is, do you have guidance on budgetary thresholds or something that might limit the chance of getting funded?
I'm not sure. Program officers, not sure I understand the question. So
I guess so. Let me try and restate it a little bit. So should you have a number in mind? Basically, I guess this is a question of getting at what should we be asking for, right? What are there limits? Right.
So this is one of my favorite pet peeves. You do not start with a number in mind, right? You do not design in this particular case. When you write a proposal, you are proposing, right? You're not executing. So you have your idea, you know what you want to do, formulate a plan, an execution plan, right? You know, what will you be doing for the duration of the award? If it's a three-year award or a 5-year award or 6-year award or whatever the duration might be, right? So you have a goal, you have an allotted period of time to execute that particular goal. Start with that. Decide then, once you describe the scope of work, decide what kind of resources do I need to execute that scope of work, right? And the resources may mean that you need to buy equipment, or you need materials, or you need students, postdocs, so on and so forth. Once you have those resources, then you can actually cost them. And that will give you the amount, the dollar amount that you are supposed to that you'll be justifying in the budget and proposing it, to put it in a proposal and submit it to NSF. If you do not do that, it is absolutely likely that the panels, the reviewers, we will evaluate your proposal and they will conclude that you're asking for too much for the scope of work that you want to execute, or you are asking too little and you're over-promising based on a very limited amount of resources. You want to be as truthful as you can possibly be and do justice to the project that you have in mind. Otherwise, we are just fooling each other. I mean, you're not serving us, you're not serving yourself, you're not serving the community. We are just doing a disservice to all parties involved.
Yeah, and also most solicitations will have a limit in them, so don't go more than that.
You can't. Most of the time it will stop you from doing that. But also, just let's go back to what the point I tried to emphasize, and it was really, Bogdan said it very well. it's what you need based on what it is you're planning to do on that project. It's amazing that when the limit is $300,000, how many proposals come in exactly at $300,000. I mean, it really is. But it really should be, the number should be tied to what it is you are planning to do on that particular proposal.
Okay, let's get into NSF's 2-month salary policy. The question to get us started on this is if the proposer is going to request more than 2 months, does that extra month need to be approved by the program officer before you can even submit the proposal, and how does that whole process work?
I'm going to let you guys handle that one because this
is my favorite NSF misconception. The 2-month limit. It's not a 2-month limit. There are only 2 months in the summer. So naturally, you can't have more than 2 months of summer support because there's only 2 months of summer. But that doesn't mean you can only have 2 months of NSF support. Relatedly, if you want to have more than 2 months of NSF support, you need to, or if you want to have support during the academic year, you need to justify why that is warranted given the intellectual work of the proposal. And you need to show that you're not overcommitting your time in the entire calendar year. But yes, you are allowed to have more than 2 months of support, just not in the summer, because there's only 2 months of summer.
Well, the actual, I'll clarify it a little bit, because the policy is you can have no more than 2 months of NSF support across all of your NSF funded projects. So when you submit a proposal, you can put more than 2 months, 2 months in the summer, but you have to justify it. And if the program officer thinks that, hey, that's right, they will include, if it's awarded, and if you're fortunate enough for it to be awarded, they will include that extra amount of time on the approved budget that will accompany the award. So it's 2 months across all NSF funded, and this is a time of proposal submission. This is how we're doing this. After an award, you can rebudget unless it's a change in objective or scope. So this is Eleanor's right. This is a very complicated topic, but we just want to make it clear. It's at the time of proposal submission, it's 2 months across all NSF funded projects. If you want more, justify it. And that's what in the budget justification, and that's what's going to help the program officer make that important decision and base it on the science you want to do.
Okay, a related question is there a minimum amount of PI effort that NSF expects to be included on proposals?
And
if you're not putting in any effort, why are you calling yourself the PI?
Bogdan, you look like you're wanting to jump right in here.
Well, that is true in general. If all you are doing is to actually submit one proposal to NSF, you supporting your research and everything else, and then obviously you will be doing. You have to add yourself to the budget, right? That being said, there are other instances when it could very well be that you are not really asking for support for yourself because your research as an individual PI is being supported elsewhere being a core program at NSF or DOE or NASA or whoever. And you are coming now to NSF, being part of a proposal that has been submitted to NSF. You are probably not the PI, most likely not the PI, but you are a senior personnel, or you are you are a co-PI on that particular project, and you are asking for a student, a postdoc, or whatever other resources might be the case. So in that particular case, you are not really asking for resources for yourself. You will be, conducted whatever activities that you are committing to as part of that particular team. But you are not really adding resources to cover your time. In that particular case, I do not think, to the extent that to my knowledge, there is no requirement that you actually have to include a fraction of a salary and make that request to NSF. As Jean mentioned before, once you actually have an award, if an award is being made, you are allowed within limits to rebudget and move money around as we use. Usually the fractions, the 0.1, months of salary for senior personnel, that is usually a requirement of the universities, of the institution, and we do not really have any say there. But there are situations where not requesting money for senior PIs is actually very much part of the standard operating procedures of the community.
And there, you won't find any amount specified in the PAP guide anywhere. That number just does not exist in there.
Yeah, there is a cap, but there is no.
Yes, exactly. A limit, but there's not a bottom line.
Yeah, if you are requesting $0 for one of your co-PIs or one of your senior personnel, then as a program officer, I will be looking at the current and pending support to look for months of effort on this proposal. And I will also be looking in the facilities plan to see that their effort is included as part of this proposal.
And anyway, you have to justify your budget, right? So you have to explain why you didn't actually ask for money for yourself in that particular situation.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to mentoring plans. So the first question is a postdoc mentoring plan required if your subrecipient has a postdoc?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, easy answer.
And if it's a separately submitted collaborative, there is one plan for the entire proposal. So we've covered it both ways.
Okay, then the follow-up to that is if you add a postdoc who joins the team after the project has been awarded, do you need to submit that document after the fact?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, another easy answer.
So we are super flexible from that. I mean, this is really something that NSF actually does very well, meaning that we review the science first, then and broader impacts and everything else. But we are looking at the scope of work that you want to do. Then we allocate resources to that particular effort. But once you actually have the award, then we trust you to do the best that you can possibly do in using those resources, advancing your own careers, training and advancing the careers of your students and postdocs and so on. So from that particular perspective, realities on the ground are bound to change. They rarely stay the same through a 3-year or a 5-year award. And therefore, we have the mechanism in place to accommodate changes. If you find a super duper extraordinary, brilliant postdoc that you would really want to hire on the project, and you are willing to actually give up support on one student in order to support this particular postdoc, or if you come into the program and asking for a supplement to support this brilliant postdoc, then by all means, we will make that part of the project if we have the resources to do so. And then at that point, we will be requesting that you submit a postdoc mentoring plan that we will be uploading in the file for the record.
Yep.
And you go on and do your work. And hopefully you'll be very successful.
Great. So we've kind of touched on most of the required section proposal. And we will probably cover this a little bit, I'm sure, in the next session, which is going to cover merit review. But we got a couple of questions asking, how do I volunteer to be a reviewer? So Bogdan and Eleanor, what is your advice for that?
Eleanor, go ahead. I spoke too much. So.
Yeah, so this is super easy. You find a program officer who works on a program you want to review for. You email them and say, hello, I would like to review for this program. Here's my CV. And then they write back to you and say, oh, I'm so excited that you would like to review for our program. They may direct you to a reviewer survey where you would put in more information, or they may say, we're not seeking reviewers at this moment, but I'll keep you in mind for later.
There you go.
There you go. Great. Well, I do want to thank Jean and Bogdan and Eleanor for speaking today, and for all of you for joining us, and hope you have a wonderful day.